This program airs statewide on California Public Television and is a California's Gold classic. This series is endorsed by the California Teachers Association, the California School Boards Association, and the California Library Association. He fought his way out of the factories and waterfront dives of Oakland to become the most popular novelist and short story writer of his day, with such internationally famous works as Call of the Wild, White Fang, and The Sea Wolf. But along with his books and stories, he was also widely known for his personal exploits. You see, he was an honest-to-goodness celebrity, an adventurer, a rascal, a colorful and controversial personality. Jack London traveled all over the world, but the last 11 years of his life, he and his wife Charmian lived in the Sonoma Valley near the little community of Glen, on what he called his beauty ranch, a ranch that today is the Jack London Historic State Park. And in this very special adventure, we'll visit that park as we continue our search together for California's gold. Good morning.
Morning, Huel. Welcome to Jack London State Historic Park.
Well, thank you. We're delighted to be here. Tell us a little bit about this park, because I know it's a kind of a hidden gem here in Sonoma. What's the significance of this place?
Well, a lot of people have heard the name Jack London before. He was a famous writer. He wrote around the turn of the century, and it was 1903 that he wrote a book called Call of the Wild. After he wrote that book, he pretty much established himself as one of America's leading writers. He was growing up in San Francisco and Oakland, living on the waterfront there. He'd had a lot of adventures, seen a lot of the world, but he was looking for a place where he could settle down, relax, get away from the rat race. He felt a lot of pressures on him in the city of Oakland that kind of distracted him from his writing, so he came out to the country, and it was the Sonoma Valley that attracted him. And he settled here. It was about 1904 that he visited and got the idea that he could actually live here and still have access to his Bay Area, the haunts that he liked on the waterfront.
So he bought a farm.
Exactly.
And this was the farm.
This was it. He put together 1,400 acres of mortgaged farms that were pretty much dirt cheap, as the saying went, and cost him a lot of money, but he had a lot of money because he made so much money from his writing. He gave it a name. The Beauty Ranch is what he called this area because really it appealed to his sense of beauty, and that was reason enough for him to buy it and to settle down here.
Now, is this his house?
This was Jack London's cottage. This is where he was living temporarily until he could build a bigger house that would be more suitable for him. But for a few years, this was going to be home, and this is actually where he and his wife Charmian set up housekeeping. Their sleeping porch is here on the front, his writing den off to the left, and it's actually in this front porch that he breathed his last. This is where he died in 1916 at the rather young age of 40.
So he wrote a lot of his famous novels in this cottage.
Right. This was kind of the production center for, he was really a writing machine. He wrote every single morning. He'd get up first thing and crank out at least 1,000 words and try and get done as early as he could so that he could then go out horseback riding over the beautiful acres here and enjoy the place.
Now, so he worked a lot on the place. I mean, he actually got his hands in running a farm.
Yeah, he wasn't just a gentleman farmer. He oversaw all of the operations. He had dozens of ranch hands helping him. He even had his sister acting as the ranch superintendent. But he was on the scene, out there, you know, directing the work, seeing that everything was done to his rather demanding expectations.
Did he know anything about ranching, about farming?
Well, it was like everything that he encountered. He taught himself all he needed to know about it. He'd go to the library and get all the books and read all the manuals, and before long, he knew everything there was to know about plowing, even though he'd never plowed a single furrow in his life. So he was really proud of the fact that he was a self-taught individual and could learn everything he needed to know about farming, and that's what he was trying to prove to his neighbors, who, of course, were kind of just doing it because that's what they grew up doing.
Yeah.
He was the Johnny-come-lately who had to prove himself here on his ranch.
Now, standing here looking out at this is a beautiful view out here of the vineyards.
Oh,
Were
yeah.
the vineyards his?
When he first got here, there were vineyards, but they weren't productive. In fact, phylloxera was wiping them out, so he just removed all the vineyards and planted other crops, hay, alfalfa, feed crops to give to his livestock. Now you see it's back in vineyards. That's today's money crop. You can still see the effects of some of the terracing in the slopes there that were actually done by his workers to combat the erosion problems that he encountered when he first came here. So we're looking at another, the signs of some of the work that he had directed.
Now, is all of this his original land that we're looking at?
Yeah, it is, all the way up to the top of Sonoma Mountain that you can see there in the distant background, the flat spot. It's about 3.5 miles from here, and he owned basically everything he could see from this spot because it appealed to him so much.
Yeah, I can see why. Look at this. This is spectacular.
Yeah, and this is, I think, just about everyone's favorite tree in the park. It's a coastal live oak. We put a fence around it so that we don't step on its roots too much. It, of course, predates everything. This house was built in the 1860s, but of course this tree was here long before that, kind of marking time when no one was really around except the native inhabitants who even depended on it for their livelihood because they could gather its acorns.
So London could have sat in his office over here and looked out here. And
oh, yeah.
I mean, did he sit under the tree? Did he write about the tree? Because it's certainly inspiring.
Oh, it certainly is. We have photographs of Jack in his hammock sitting under this tree. I think it was probably one of the favorite things for him to do, to just be outdoors, either by himself or with his dog Possum, or with one of his saddle horses tied up to the hitching rails that were out here at that time.
So he really got into this country life.
Oh yeah, yeah. He lived and breathed for the time he could really spend out here, just being, in the fresh air, out watching the workers. Now I want to show you something really unusual and special here in the park. Something that shows a side of Jack London that not even his most ardent admirers really know about. He was interested in raising livestock, and especially pigs, and he built this palace for them.
Pigs?
Pigs. We call it the Pig Palace, even though Jack London never referred to it as that. It's a stone piggery, and I think it's really a marvel of design and engineering, especially for 1915, which was when he had it built.
So this is where he kept pigs?
Right.
How did Jack London get interested in pigs?
Well, it went hand in hand with his idea of returning to the soil as a way of making a living. If you're going to make a living on the land, you're going to raise animals. If you raise animals, you might well end up raising pigs. And if you choose pigs, why not choose the best? He had Duroc Jerseys, a purebred. And he decided that if I'm going to raise them, I'm going to do it right, and I'm going to build them an environment that they can thrive in.
Wow.
So he had his stonemasons set to work, and on Jack London's own design, come up with this circular stone piggery with 17 pens. Each individual family had its own suite, I guess you'd call it, with a... Come on inside here. Try it out.
So this is the individual, here Louis, let's let Louis come in here, come on in. This is the individual stall.
The individual stall, you're in the courtyard, I guess you'd say now, where the pigs would come out to eat. The feeding troughs are located by the front edge, which was tactically important because the feed house, the round feed house, is right in the center of the structure.
Feed house right over here.
So whoever's job it was to feed the pigs, they could do it with a minimum amount of steps by simply walking out of one of the two doorways where all the feed was stockpiled and bring it out to the edges here and feed all 17 families of pigs in a really minimal amount of time.
What an interesting juxtaposition between Jack London's writing and the fact that he, you know, was working with pigs. I mean, was there nothing this man wasn't kind of interested in or curious about?
I guess not. And as unusual as it seems, he ended up fitting the animals and the fields and all of what we're seeing right now into his writing as well. He was really obsessed with the idea of farming. How he came to be so obsessed is still a mystery, I guess, especially to the extent that he would kind of wrap himself up in projects like this that obviously took a lot of time.
Yeah, this is a big deal.
Yeah. And right down here, we have one of the cement watering troughs for the shorthorn cattle that London had in pens in this particular area.
Wow, this is beautiful. He had this built.
Right. He wanted to build things that would last. Permanence was important to him. And he had a ready collection of rocks everywhere you walked. There were rocks. He could crush them and make the materials for troughs such as this one. Oh, this is another of the mystery items. We don't describe it in the brochures, but since you asked, this is the bull exerciser.
The bull exerciser.
Yeah, apparently the bulls needed to be kept fit by keeping them exercised, and one way to do it was to hook them up to the struts radiating out from the center of this, what looks like a grinding wheel, I guess, and just have them walk around in circles.
Now, is this the Valley of the Moon? I keep hearing about the Valley of the Moon.
Yeah, well, this is it, Huel. You've got a nice vista across the bottom of the Sonoma Valley up to the other side. The Mayacamas run the length of the valley on that side, and there's an old Indian legend about how the Valley of the Moon came to be. Sonoma is one of the translation of the old native word for moon, and apparently at a certain time of the year the moon is said to rise and set several times in one evening over the ridge of the Mayacamas. It's really an optical illusion created, I think, by the jagged edge over there. If you're standing and you move from one spot to another, it will seem to rise and set.
Did London ever write about the Valley of the Moon?
Oh yeah, he wrote one of his better known ranching novels is entitled Valley of the Moon, where he capitalizes on that fact that Sonoma Valley had that other name. And it's really, I think, made it a popular nickname for this valley now. The story was about a couple in Oakland that moves away from the rat race to get back to nature and settle down farming, just like Jack and Charmian London ended up doing.
Now, Greg, you have brought us to a place that is very special in the park, not only for the visitors who come here, but I guess for Jack London and Charmian themselves.
Right, Huel. This was really a special spot, as you can see even today. This time of year the water is a little bit low, but Jack London created a lake by having this dammed, and his workers set to work on it in 1915. We don't know how long it took them, but they were able to dam off the end of it so that this lagoon would fill up with water and be a nice swimming hole.
Now, is this a place they came to a lot? Would he have come here to write or just to recreate?
I think it was mostly recreation. He, in fact, also had his workers put together a little redwood log bathhouse over here off to the side, so that
oh, there's the bathhouse.
That's where they'd go to change clothes. And then there'd be there used to be a pier down here to the water's edge, and you just go running down the end of it and take a jump in the lake.
So this is the original bathhouse?
Right.
It looks like something out of the Swiss Alps or something.
Yeah, it's really the definition of rustic when you look at it just perched there.
Wow, that is wonderful. And the pier came out right here.
Right down into the water. They could go canoeing, swimming, just to cool off. It gets really hot here in the summer. And also you could go fishing. He used to have catfish in here.
Wow. So this must have been quite the invitation to have been invited by Jack London to come up and spend the day at his, did he call this a pond or a lake, or what would be the romantic literary term for it?
Well, it was much larger then. I think they could call it a lake and get away with it. It's really kind of a pond today. I think it was really a highlight of the visitors' stay here, to come up on horseback, have a barbecue at the lake, go swimming, and then even be joined by the famous writer Jack and his wife Charmian.
Now, what are these ducks? Are these ducks out here?
Well, they're actually coots.
Coots?
They're a mud hen is another popular name for them, rather than...
They're putting on quite a show for us this morning.
Yeah, I think they're excited by us being here.
Well, it's absolutely beautiful. Look at this. So all of these, this is probably the way it looked
Pretty much so.
when he was here.
Pretty much so.
These reeds were here?
Well, it was a little more cleared out so that you'd have more room to swim and go canoeing in. But other than that, I'm sure it's pretty much like this. You wouldn't have as much activity in the air. There wouldn't be airplanes flying over, and it would be quiet like this all day long. It's early in the morning right now, which is really my favorite time to actually come up here.
Wow.
You really get a sense of the serenity and the peace that Jack and Charmian, you know, they moved out here to get away from the rat race, and this really epitomizes just the peacefulness of the country.
Now we have hiked about half a mile into one of the more obscure parts of the park to see what I think is not only the most interesting thing here, but really the most poignant place in the whole park.
Right, Huel. This is probably my favorite place in the park. I always enjoy coming out here. Jack and Charmian were living in the little cottage, and they had
the one we've already seen.
Right, and they had the idea that they really needed a bigger place, and a place that had a little more grandness to it, I guess. They sat down with an architect and they put all their dreams on paper, and they came up with this idea of their family home. And it took 3 or 4 years of careful planning, coming out here every day to supervise construction before the Londons were really happy with what they had. And what they had was really magnificent. 4 stories tall, had plans to move all their belongings into it over from the cramped conditions in the cottage. And just about a month before they were ready to actually take up residence, it burned. And
It burned.
It burned. They
totally down.
Never got a chance to live in it.
So this is just kind of here as a reminder of what might have been.
Exactly. We keep it in this condition for a couple of reasons. One is the Londons never got a chance to live in it. It really represents the history of their dream for their home having gone up in flames. The other thing is, imagine the expense of trying to rebuild a house this magnificent.
Yeah, when you look at this thing, it's made out of this wonderful big stone,
right,
that you see.
Right, the lava rocks, as we call them, volcanic stone, is actually dynamited out of the valley floor a couple of miles away from here, and they hauled it up the hill with horse and wagon and used scaffolding and pulley and tackle and brute strength to get all these stones into place.
Can we get up in here?
Yeah, we can walk up onto the overlook platform.
Because this thing is amazing. I mean, it was truly a mansion.
Oh yeah, it was not lacking in any detail for creature comforts, as Jack London called them. And it was going to have room for him to unpack all of his books and his possessions, the souvenirs they'd collected from the South Seas, and room for their children to run around in. Unfortunately, they never were able to have those children. Not only did that dream go up in smoke, but so did their house. So it was really represents one of the more unfortunate parts of the Jack London story here, but it's certainly quite a striking reminder of that phase of our history. This will show you how immense the Wolf House was going to be. Just when you get on the inside and are able to look up from ground level, and then imagine a couple of more stories above what we can see
So
here.
it was going to go up 2 more floors from here.
Right.
Now what is this?
Well, this is the reflection pool, so that as you stood here, the building would seem even taller as it reflected the sides of the building.
So this was the rooms were built around
Right.
a courtyard with this reflection pool in the middle.
Exactly, in a horseshoe shape. You can see how deep this reflection pool is, which leads us to believe they were going to use it as a swimming pool. And we also read that they had plans to stock it with bass so that you could actually fish out of it.
Wow. This is an amazing place. And it's very kind of eerie in here, isn't it?
Well, I think so. I think it's maybe the one place in the park where you can actually feel the presence of Jack London still. Wow. It's bright and sunny today, but imagine on foggy days or gloomy days, that feeling intensifies, if you can imagine that.
Yeah. This must have broken their hearts,
well, I'm
not
sure
to
it
be
did.
able to move in here.
I'm sure it did. They put on a good face about it, saying that they thought they'd rebuild when they got the chance. Unfortunately, 3 years after this place burned, Jack London died, and he never got a chance to rebuild. Jack died in 1916. He was only 40. Charmian, 3 years later, started building this house, which we call the House of Happy Walls.
The House of Happy Walls. What a great name for it.
Right. She lived in it until her death in 1955. She entertained, invited people inside to see it. And now, as a park headquarters, we use it for office space, but it's also very special inside, and I want to show you just what's in here.
So this is like a museum.
It is our park museum now.
The House of Happy Walls. So this is the recreation. Well, actually, this is his office.
Right, this is the real thing. We've just reconstructed it in a different room in a different house because we want people to be able to see it because the cottage is not yet restored. Someday this will all go back where it belongs, but for now you can come and see Jack London's hat and his gloves that he used when he was writing, keep the sun out of his eyes and the rains from cutting his hands. Typewriter that he didn't use, but his wife Charmian would use to type up his manuscripts.
So he never typed? He didn't know how to type?
He didn't get along well with mechanical instruments. He just hand wrote everything in a pretty sloppy longhand that I think only Charmian could read. And she typed up everything for him.
And what's this?
Well, an old gramophone. This one's a little beat up. He took it to the South Seas and used it to soothe some of the native populations he ran across. As you can see, it still rolls.
Wow. So he took that to the South Sea Islands with him.
Right.
And what was this? This looks like an old disc.
It's actually a dictaphone, the earliest form of an electronic recording device. He used to dictate all of his letters. He had so much correspondence, he would just dash off the letters verbally and not have to worry about them getting finished off.
And no Jack London office would be complete without a globe of the world.
Right, Jack London, the globe hopper. He needed that to know where he was going the next day, I guess. His wife, Charmian, took a prized photograph of Jack one day on board their boat, the Roamer, and it was one of Jack's favorite shots of himself. It was recently used back in 1976 for a centennial edition of a postage stamp on Jack London.
Well, this is special. What a wonderful room. His office.
Jack made it very clear to his wife Charmian early on that if he should be the first to die, he wouldn't mind if his ashes were laid to rest under one of the volcanic stones that had been rejected from the building of the Wolf House. So he was the first to go, and his ashes are laid to rest beneath this stone.
A simple volcanic stone like the ones that were put in what was to have been his beloved, beautiful house, the Wolf House.
Exactly. So I think it's poetic and fitting, and it's another one of the more poignant locations in the park that people come and kind of pay their respects to the Londons.
But a very fitting and a very simple answer for a very interesting, I mean, this guy had a life, didn't he?
Well, he certainly had that. Even if he was only 40, he didn't get cheated out of any adventures in his life. When he was just a kid, he was an oyster pirate on the San Francisco Bay. He used to raid the oyster beds and sell them to restaurants as a way to make money for his family. He sailed to Japan when he was only 17 as an able-bodied seaman, hunting seals off the coast of Japan. When he came back from that, I guess he still didn't have enough, so he went hoboing across the United States to see the sights. He finally saw the sights in Niagara Falls and got arrested for being a vagrant, not having any money, and that kind of sobered him up, so he made it back home where he opened the books and decided to become a writer.
So he always had this something about him from the earliest days that set him apart, that set him on a path for adventure.
Yeah, he certainly had that. It was a wanderlust and a joy of living that didn't let him really settle down in any one spot for very long. This was the place that he really considered home and came to be his final resting place.
Well, I was going to say, he probably stayed here, right here in, you know, Sonoma, right here in the Valley of the Moon, longer than he stayed anywhere else in his life.
Yeah, this was the place where he finally didn't have to wander anymore. I think there was enough satisfaction here in all that he'd seen in his adventurings around the world that kept attracting him back
here
to this spot.
Well, hello everybody. I'm Huell Hauser, and I sure hope you enjoyed this adventure. If you'd like to see it again or share it with your family or friends, or perhaps donate a copy to your local school or library, it's available on video cassette and on DVD. All you have to do is call 1-800-266-5727, and we'll be glad to send it to you right away.